The stars twinkled above Earth, a seemingly ordinary planet in a vast and mysterious universe. But to the Galactic Alliance, Earth was far from ordinary. For centuries, they had watched, observed, and analyzed this small blue planet, its inhabitants. Humans were a curious species. They had witnessed humanity grow, evolve, and fight among themselves. The Alliance had been monitoring them closely, waiting for the right moment to act. From the outer reaches of the galaxy, their enormous ships hovered in silence, cloaked from human sight. The Alliance's most advanced technology kept them hidden in the deep void of space. They had sent unmanned drones to collect data, watched through telescopes, and even hacked into Earth's communication networks. But still, something about humanity kept them intrigued. There was more to them than the Alliance could see on the surface. Inside the command center of one of their massive ships, the Council of the Galactic Alliance gathered. These were beings from various worlds, creatures of immense power and intellect. They were the ones who controlled the destiny of entire star systems. As they sat around a massive table, discussing the future of Earth, their leader, a towering alien with silver skin, spoke in a voice that resonated throughout the room. Earth, he said, looking down at a holographic image of the planet, is like an arena, and humans, they are the gladiators. The room fell silent. The words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. The others listened, their eyes narrowing. The leader continued, "We've seen their wars, their destruction, but we've also seen their resilience. They fight often without reason, often without mercy. They are born to survive, to conquer. Earth's humans are far more than we first realized." Another member of the council, a being with tentacles instead of arms, leaned forward. "But what makes them so special? Why should we care? They are just another primitive species, no different from the many we've encountered." The leader's expression hardened, his eyes reflecting the weight of centuries of observation. "You are wrong. We've made a grave mistake. The prophecy spoke of a planet, a gladiatorial arena, where the strongest would rise. It was never about the world itself, it was about its people. The humans, they are our final test." A murmur of disbelief ran through the room. The beings in the council had all witnessed the rise of countless species, but none had ever shown the potential that humans had. They had always believed that Earth was just another experiment, another test world to be monitored and catalogued. But now, it seemed that Earth's humans were the true focus of the prophecy. The leader turned away from the table and walked over to the large window. The massive ship floated just outside Earth's orbit. "You see, we have underestimated them for far too long. They are unpredictable, they evolve quickly, and their greatest strength lies in their ability to adapt. They are gladiators in a cosmic arena, whether they know it or not." As the leader spoke, the other members of the council began to nod slowly. There was an undeniable truth to his words. The humans' capacity for violence was matched only by their drive to survive. They had built great civilizations, yet destroyed them just as quickly. They had learned from their mistakes, only to repeat them in even more devastating ways. But the leader knew that it was their very unpredictability that made them dangerous. In the grand scheme of the galaxy, the humans were wild cards, unpredictable, chaotic, and full of potential. If they could harness that chaos, if they could unlock the full potential of humanity, they would become the strongest species in the galaxy. The council's tension grew, and another member, an ancient being with a crystalline body, spoke up. "What do we do now? What's the next step?" The leader turned back, his eyes glowing with purpose. "We watch, we wait, we test them, and when the time comes, we make our move. But we must be careful. The gladiators may be more than we bargained for. They may turn the arena into something we can't control." The Alliance had its plans in motion. The humans didn't know it yet, but their lives were about to change forever. The first test was coming, and it would push humanity to its breaking point. For now, humanity was still oblivious. The vast majority of Earth's inhabitants were going about their daily lives, unaware of the massive forces at play above their heads. The ordinary citizens of Earth couldn't possibly fathom the truth. But as the Galactic Alliance continued its observations, they noticed something strange. There were whispers in Earth's history, ancient texts, and myths that spoke of warriors, gladiators fighting for the fate of their world. And with each passing day, The Alliance grew more certain that Earth's greatest challenge was yet to come. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds and bathed the planet in light, the Galactic Alliance prepared to take the next step. The humans had no idea that their arena was about to open and that they were already stepping onto the battleground. The city buzzed with the usual chaos of life. Cars honked, people shouted, and the morning light bathed the streets in a golden hue. It was just another day on Earth, or so it seemed. But in the silence of space high above, something had shifted. The Galactic Alliance had made its first move. At the United Nations headquarters, world leaders gathered for a critical meeting, one that was meant to address the escalating tension between nations. Their discussions were interrupted by an unexpected broadcast and image of a sleek, otherworldly ship appeared on every screen, floating above Earth's atmosphere. The message was simple, yet chilling. We come in peace, but the peace will not last unless you accept the challenge. The voice that spoke was calm, almost soothing, yet it carried an unmistakable weight. It was not human. The speaker was an alien, and his words carried an authority that seemed to echo from across the stars. I am the ambassador of the Galactic Alliance, he said, and I bring with me a challenge, one that will decide your fate and the fate of your world. You have been chosen. Prepare yourselves. Panic swept through the room. The leaders exchanged nervous glances, some standing, others frozen in place. The message was broadcast across the globe, reaching every corner of the planet. People stared at their screens, unsure of what to make of it. Was this real? Were they under attack? Or was this some kind of elaborate hoax? But the message was clear. Humanity had been noticed, and now it was time to prove their worth. Back on the streets, life continued as usual. People went to work, families sat down for breakfast, and children played in parks. Yet beneath this ordinary surface, the air seemed heavier. A strange sense of foreboding spread like wildfire. Something was coming, and it was unlike anything humanity had ever faced before. As the days passed, the news flooded in. The ambassador's words rang in everyone's ears, and the world began to question what this challenge meant. Experts from all fields were called upon to analyze the message. Was it a warning, a test, and who exactly? Was this Galactic Alliance? There were no answers, only more questions. Then, without warning, the first test arrived. It came in the form of a sudden, inexplicable attack. The skies above the world's capitals were darkened by strange ships, sleek, metallic, and unlike anything seen before. They hovered ominously, sending pulses of energy that shook buildings and sent people scrambling for cover. There were no demands, no threats, only the overwhelming presence of these ships. The world watched in horror as the alien forces made their first move. But as the ships began to unleash their power, something unexpected happened. The humans did not cower. They fought back. In the midst of the chaos, people discovered abilities they never knew they had. Soldiers, police officers, and even ordinary citizens displayed strength, speed, and intelligence beyond human limits. They fought with a ferocity that surprised even the alien invaders. The world had been thrust into a brutal test, and for the first time, humans understood the true meaning of the ambassador's words. They were gladiators among the chaos. A young woman, Sarah, stood on the rooftop of a high-rise building in New York City, watching the alien ships above. Her heart pounded in her chest as the sound of explosions filled the air. She had never been a fighter, never considered herself strong or capable of heroism. But today, something within her had shifted. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed the weapon she had kept for protection and ran towards the chaos below. As Sarah joined the fray, something strange happened to her. The world around her slowed, her senses sharpened. She could see the movements of the enemy with incredible clarity, anticipating their every move before they made it. With every step, every decision, she felt stronger, faster, more alive than she had ever felt. She was not just fighting for survival. She was fighting for something more. It was as though she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. And then, as quickly as it began, the attack stopped. The ships retreated into the sky, leaving destruction in their wake. But humanity had won a small victory. They had fought back, and they had survived. But more importantly, They had proved something to themselves. They were not weak. They were gladiators. And the arena had just begun. But the Alliance was watching. They had seen how the humans responded. They had witnessed the first test, and they were impressed. But they knew that this was only the beginning. The true challenge had yet to come. As Sarah stood in the midst of the ruined city, she realized that this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for their place in the universe. The gladiators were not just humans. They were a force to be reckoned with, and the arena was now open. The challenge had been issued, and Earth was ready for whatever came next. But as the days passed, more strange occurrences began to unfold. People began to hear whispers of an ancient prophecy, a prophecy that spoke of the gladiators, of their rise, and of the battles that awaited them. These whispers filled the air, fueling the growing sense that humanity's greatest trial was still to come. The Galactic Alliance had set their sights on Earth, and they were not going to back down. The tests would continue, and the gladiators would be tested again and again. But humanity was not afraid. They had survived the first challenge, and now they were ready for whatever came next. The arena had been set, and the gladiators had stepped forward. The world was still recovering from the shock of the alien attack, but the silence that followed was unsettling. The distant hum of the alien ships as they retreated into space was all that remained, to remind humanity of the chaos they had just endured. But this peace was deceptive. It was the calm before the storm. The humans had shown they were capable of defending themselves, but the Galactic Alliance was far from finished. The days after the attack were filled with questions. Governments scrambled to understand what had happened, while the public struggled to process the reality of what they had just witnessed. But in the chaos, one thing became clear. Humanity was no longer just a species on a random planet. They had been chosen. They had been thrust into a game, much larger than themselves, a game where the stakes were the very survival of their world. In the aftermath of the battle, the people of Earth started to come together as news spread of the strange abilities exhibited by certain individuals during the fight. Whispers turned into rumors, and those rumors evolved into something more. There were stories of ordinary people, teachers, students, even parents who had done extraordinary things. They had fought with strength and strategy beyond human limits. Sarah, the young woman who had stood on the rooftop in New York, found herself at the center of it all. She wasn't a soldier nor a hero by any means, but in the heat of battle, she had felt something shift inside her. The world around her had slowed, and her senses had sharpened to a degree she couldn't explain. Every movement, every decision, had come with an instinctual precision she never knew she had. The power she felt was undeniable, and it scared her. As she sat in her apartment, still shaken by the chaos, she couldn't help but wonder what was happening to her and to the world. She was just one of many, but it seemed that something was awakening within humanity. It wasn't just about fighting the alien invaders anymore. It was about something deeper, something primal, something that made humans more than just survivors. They were gladiators. The stories from across the globe only confirmed it. Across every continent, in every major city, people were experiencing the same strange phenomenon. Ordinary men and women were reporting enhanced abilities, strength, agility, intelligence, and even psychic-like intuition. The world was starting to notice the change, and so was the Galactic Alliance. But they weren't done yet. Soon, the second test arrived. This time, it wasn't an attack. It was something far more insidious. The Galactic Alliance sent its emissaries down to Earth, not as soldiers, but as observers. These beings blended in seamlessly with humanity, taking on human-like forms. They walked among the people, unnoticed at first, gathering information. But as they did, they observed the humans' newfound strength, their ability to adapt, and their growing unity. It was becoming clear that the gladiators were no longer just a theory, they were real. And then came the challenge. It started with a cryptic message delivered to every human leader. The Galactic Alliance had set a series of trials, and humanity's place in the galaxy would depend on how well they performed. These trials would test the humans in every way imaginable, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Only those who proved themselves worthy would be allowed to enter the arena. The others would be cast aside, forgotten, left to live in the shadows of those who succeeded. The The first trial was a test of endurance. Across the world, massive challenges were set up and seen by the public, but felt deeply by those who participated. Cities were divided into zones, each one locked in a competition that stretched the human spirit to its breaking point. The gladiators were called upon once again, but this time, they would have to endure more than physical pain. They would face their deepest fears, their greatest weaknesses. Sarah found herself in the heart of one of the zones, surrounded by other survivors. The trial had begun, and the stakes were higher than she could have imagined. The first challenge was simple on the surface: climb a towering wall, reaching the summit before time ran out. But as the gladiators began to ascend, the wall started to shift and change, throwing obstacles in their way. What had seemed like a simple task quickly turned into a test of willpower. Each obstacle represented something deeper: memories of past failures, doubts, and fears. Every time Sarah struggled to pull herself up, she felt the weight of the challenge bearing down on her. But as she reached the top, her mind cleared. For the first time, she understood. This was not just about the physical task, it was about overcoming her own limitations. It was about showing that humanity could rise above its darkest moments and emerge stronger. The Galactic Alliance had underestimated them, and now humanity was beginning to see that their true strength came not from their physical bodies, but from their ability to push through when it seemed impossible. The trial was only the beginning. As the days passed, new tests emerged, tests that pushed the gladiators to their absolute limits. Some failed, some faltered, but the survivors, the ones who rose above, began to bond together. They shared their experiences, their strengths, and their knowledge. Humanity was starting to unite in a way it never had before. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving to the universe that humans were more than just gladiators in an arena. They were a force to be reckoned with. The Galactic Alliance, watching from afar, could see that their plan was working. Humanity was being tested, pushed, and molded into something greater. But what the Alliance didn't realize was that humanity was beginning to see the bigger picture too. The trials were just a game, a test of survival. But the real battle was yet to come. As Sarah looked out over the vast expanse of the city below, she felt the weight of her journey ahead. The trials had only just begun, but she was no longer afraid. The gladiators were ready, and they would show the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. The arena was theirs, and they would fight for it. The world had barely caught its breath from the trials, and yet a new shadow loomed over humanity. The Galactic Alliance had watched, studied, and made their calculations, but they had not anticipated the power of the humans' unity. The gladiators were no longer just fighting for survival. They were beginning to fight for something much larger, something that had stirred within them all along: freedom. The message from the Galactic Alliance came with chilling precision. You have proven yourselves worthy of the arena, but the arena is not where you belong. The true test is not survival, it is control. This time, the challenge was not one of strength or endurance. It was a battle for minds, a contest of willpower and intellect. Earth's gladiators were about to be pushed in ways they had never imagined. At first, the trials were hidden within the fabric of the world. The trials didn't announce themselves like the previous ones. Instead, they crept into every aspect of life, appearing where humans least expected them. It started with the technology they relied on. Suddenly, communication systems were hijacked. The internet was flooded with strange messages that made no sense. Satellite systems scrambled, and emergency alerts blared on all devices. It was clear the Galactic Alliance was testing their ability to think under pressure, to adapt without losing control. Sarah, now a leader among the gladiators, found herself in the middle of it all. As the world's systems began to break down, the people turned to their leaders, searching for answers. But the leaders had no answers to give. This was unlike anything humanity had ever faced, a challenge that could not be met with force alone. The gladiators had fought with their strength, but now they had to fight with their minds. For the first time, Sarah felt out of her depth. She had grown accustomed to the physical challenges, to fighting for survival. But this was different. This was a war of ideas, a battle to control the narrative. The Galactic Alliance wasn't just testing humanity's ability to survive. They were testing humanity's ability to outsmart and outthink an entire intergalactic empire. The stakes were higher than ever before. The people of Earth, though confused and disoriented, began to rally together as the technology they had relied on crumbled. New alliances formed. It wasn't just about surviving another alien attack. It was about surviving the manipulation of their own world. The gladiators were no longer just fighters in a physical sense. They were becoming warriors in a digital battlefield. The lines between reality and illusion began to blur. Humanity had to relearn how to live without the systems they had built and relied on for centuries. Sarah's first instinct was to take charge, to lead her people as she had done before. But this time, the solution wasn't about brute force or defiance. It was about communication, coordination, and trust. She gathered a small group of the most brilliant minds, engineers, hackers, philosophers, and strategists. They sat together in a hidden underground facility. The glow of computer screens their only source of light. Think of this like the first test, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the weight of the situation. We've been chosen because we're unpredictable, because we adapt. We've already proven that we can survive against their attacks. But this is different. This is about us rewriting the rules of the game. It's about taking control of the narrative. If we can do that, if we can beat them at their own game, we win. Her words sparked a fire in the room. They didn't have to rely on the old systems, the ones that were now failing them. They could build new systems, new strategies, new ways of thinking. Together, they would hack the system, rewrite the story, and show the Galactic Alliance that humans were not just gladiators in an arena. They were architects of their own fate. As the group worked, a strange sense of unity grew. The gladiators were no longer isolated individuals struggling for survival. They were a collective force with a shared goal to outwit and outlast the manipulative hand of the Galactic Alliance. The world, once divided and fractured, was beginning to heal. Brought together by a single unshakable truth, humanity was not just a pawn in an intergalactic game. They were players in their own right. Days turned into weeks, and the new trials came faster. The Alliance sent artificial intelligence programs to disrupt Earth's communications, sowing confusion and fear. But with every challenge, the gladiators grew stronger, learning new ways to fight, to adapt, and to thrive without relying on the old systems. They began to fight back with intelligence, ingenuity, and determination, proving that the human mind was the most powerful weapon of all. Sarah stood on the rooftop of a building, overlooking the city, watching as the lights flickered and came back to life. The power had been restored, but it wasn't the same as before. It was better. This new energy, this new sense of possibility, was something that the Galactic Alliance hadn't accounted for. Humans had learned how to control their own fate. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their future. The message from the Galactic Alliance arrived once more. This time more direct. You have passed the first trial. You have shown that you can adapt. But the arena is about to change once again. Prepare yourselves. The true test is yet to come. But Sarah and the other gladiators weren't afraid anymore. They had already proven something much more powerful than their strength or resilience. They had proven that they were more than mere participants in the Galactic Alliance's game. They were the ones who would define the rules. They were the ones who would decide the future. And with that realization, the battle had changed. It was no longer just about survival. It was about shaping their own destiny. They had been chosen for a reason. And now they would show the galaxy that Earth's gladiators were ready for whatever came next. The days were growing longer, and so too was the weight of the challenge. The Galactic Alliance had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, but the gladiators were proving them wrong, one trial at a time. They had faced the physical tests, the mental traps, and the digital warfare, and yet, something in the air was different now, a new kind of tension. It was not the tension of uncertainty, but the tension of anticipation. The gladiators had become something more than mere participants in a cosmic game. They had become players who could rewrite the rules. Sarah, standing at the heart of the resistance, felt this shift. She had learned to trust her instincts and the people around her. But this next trial was different. The whispers of an ancient prophecy, once thought to be a myth, were now becoming reality. She had heard the tales of Earth's role in a larger cosmic arena place, where only the strongest survived. But now, the truth was unfolding, and the gladiators were ready for something far more significant than just survival. The prophecy spoke of a reckoning, of a final battle between humanity and the forces that had manipulated them for so long. The Galactic Alliance, once a distant force watching from the stars, was now an active presence on Earth, their emissaries moving through cities unnoticed. But Sarah knew that their presence was not one of peace. They were preparing for the final trial. It would not be a test of strength or intellect, but a test of the soul, a test of whether humanity could break free from the chains that bound them. The trials had changed. They were no longer about surviving in the arena. They were about understanding the true nature of the game. Humanity had fought for survival. They had proved their resilience, but now they needed to prove something else, their ability to break free from the control of the Galactic Alliance and redefine their place in the universe. Sarah gathered the gladiators, those who had fought beside her, those who had become more than just allies. They were family, bound not by blood but by the trials they had faced together. They had fought against impossible odds, but this was different. This was the final challenge. "We've come this far, but it's not over yet," Sarah said, her voice steady but filled with an unshakable resolve. "The Alliance wants to control us. They want to shape us into something they can use in their game, but we are not pawns. We are not just gladiators in an arena. We are humans, and we choose our own fate." Her words resonated through the room. The gladiators looked at each other, nodding, understanding the weight of what was being asked of them. It was not enough to simply fight back anymore. It was about rising above the game, about refusing to be defined by the trials set before them. They were about to face the final test, and they were ready to shatter the very concept of the arena. As they made their way toward the heart of the Alliance's power, Sarah couldn't help but feel the weight of the universe pressing down on her. This was no longer just about saving Earth. It was about reclaiming humanity's destiny. The Galactic Alliance had spent centuries shaping species, molding them into warriors for their own purposes. But Earth's gladiators had learned the most important lesson. True strength came not from their ability to fight, but from their ability to choose their own path. The final trial came in the form of a choice. The Galactic Alliance offered humanity a place in the grand cosmic order, a place among the stars. As long as they bent the knee, it was a tempting offer, one that promised power and security in exchange for submission. The gladiators knew the cost all too well. To accept would mean the end of their autonomy, the end of their fight for freedom. But Sarah knew that the real battle was not against the Alliance, it was against the idea that humanity had no place in the universe except as a tool to be used. The true challenge was not about defeating an enemy. It was about rejecting the narrative that had been imposed on them. The gladiators had learned to fight for survival, but now they had to fight for something far more precious, their freedom. "You want us to join your ranks, to be a part of your empire," Sarah said, standing tall before the emissary of the Galactic Alliance. "But we are not yours to command. We are not your gladiators. We are humanity, and we choose our own fate." The emissary's eyes flickered with surprise, and for a brief moment, Sarah saw a flash of something akin to fear. The Alliance had never expected this response. They had thought humanity would kneel, that the gladiators would bow before their might, but instead, they were faced with defiance, something the Alliance had not anticipated. The emissary stepped back, his expression unreadable. "You misunderstand. The galaxy has always belonged to the strongest, and you are not strong enough to defy us." Sarah's gaze hardened. Strength isn't about power or dominance. It's about choice, and humanity chooses to stand. We choose to fight, not for your approval, but for our future. The emissary said nothing, his silence heavy with the realization that humanity had transcended the game. The gladiators were no longer players in an arena. They were free. As the Galactic Alliance's emissary disappeared into the shadows, Sarah looked around at her fellow gladiators. They had done it. They had won not just the battle, but the right to choose their own future. The final trial had been passed, not through strength or strategy, but through the very thing that made humanity unique, their ability to choose their own path. The arena was no longer a place. It was a memory. Humanity had stepped out of it and into the unknown. The stars above, once symbols of the Galactic Alliance's control, were now symbols of their freedom. The gladiators had fought for their survival, but now they would fight for their place in the universe on their own terms. The game was over. The future had just begun. The world was on the cusp of something monumental, a change so profound that it could redefine everything. The Galactic Alliance, once an invisible presence looming above Earth, had underestimated the true nature of humanity. The gladiators had already proven themselves in countless trials, but now the true test was beginning, a test that would determine if humanity could truly break free from the Alliance's grasp or if they would fall into their plans of domination. That Sarah stood in the heart of a hidden underground base, the only sound the soft hum of technology and the whispers of those around her. The gladiators had become more than just a force of resistance. They were the spark of revolution, the vanguard of a new era. But even as they celebrated their victories, an ominous cloud hung over them. The Galactic Alliance had shown their hand, but they were not done yet. The message came through in the dead of night, a broadcast that shattered the calm of the world. The Galactic Alliance had initiated the final phase of their plan. They would now take the battle to Earth using their ultimate weapon. But what the humans didn't know was that the weapon they were preparing was not one of mass destruction. It was something far worse. It was a weapon of manipulation, a tool designed to infiltrate the minds of humanity and turn them against each other. The Alliance had learned that humanity's greatest strength was not its ability to fight, but its unity, and they were about to shatter it. The weapon was called the Divide. It was a massive network of advanced technology, capable of broadcasting thought-altering waves across the entire planet. The Alliance had spent years perfecting it, knowing that humanity's greatest weakness was their susceptibility to fear and division. The Divide would create chaos, causing distrust, suspicion, and paranoia to spread like wildfire among the people. The gladiators had to stop it, or Earth would fall into disarray, ripe for the Alliance's conquest. Sarah knew that the battle was no longer just about fighting the invaders. It was about saving humanity from itself. She gathered her most trusted allies, the gladiators, who had stood beside her through every trial, and explained the plan. This time, the fight would be different. It wasn't about brute strength or agility. It was about unity, trust, and the ability to see beyond the lies that would soon threaten to tear the world apart. We fought against their armies, their weapons, and their schemes. But this is different. The Divide isn't something we can destroy with a weapon or a punch. It's a battle for the soul of humanity. We have to stay united, or everything we've fought for will be lost, Sarah said, her voice unwavering. The gladiators were ready. They had proven their physical strength, their ability to fight back against the odds, but now they had to show their true power. The world watched as Sarah led a group of the brightest minds, scientists, engineers, and strategists into the heart of the Alliance's network. The Divide had already begun to broadcast, its effects creeping into the minds of every human. On the planet, across cities, tensions flared. Neighbors began to turn against each other. Governments collapsed under the weight of mistrust. Friends became enemies. Families tore apart. The Alliance's weapon was succeeding. But Sarah and the gladiators were determined to fight back, not with guns or fists, but with unity. They fought to break the signal, working tirelessly to infiltrate the network. Each step was a battle of its own, as they faced wave after wave of mind-altering propaganda designed to make them doubt each other. The Divide was everywhere. It was in the media, in the air, in the thoughts of the people. But Sarah refused to let it win. She knew that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its military might. It was its capacity for connection, for trust, for standing together in the face of overwhelming odds. Hours turned into days, and the battle intensified. The gladiators pushed forward, using every ounce of their strength to infiltrate the Divide's network. It was a race against time. If they couldn't stop it, the world would fall into chaos, into the very hands of the Galactic Alliance. The Divide would fracture humanity irreparably, leaving them vulnerable to the Alliance's final conquest. Sarah stood before the final relay, the core of the Divide, her heart racing. She knew that this moment would decide everything. The gladiators had fought for their survival, for their freedom, but now they were fighting for something much greater, the future of humanity itself. The air was thick with tension as Sarah and her team fought to shut down the signal. Every movement was critical, every decision a life or death choice. The divide was pushing back, trying to turn the gladiators against each other, trying to make them doubt their mission, doubt their unity. But the gladiators were stronger than ever. They had learned to fight together, not just as individuals, but as one. They had learned that their true strength lay in their ability to trust each other, to rely on their shared purpose. In the final moments, as the signal grew louder, more intense, Sarah's mind cleared. She knew what had to be done. With a single push of a button, she activated the device that would break the divide's hold on humanity. The broadcast cut out. The signal flickered, and then silence. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. And then, slowly, the tension began to ease. People looked at each other, uncertain, but no longer afraid. The divide had been stopped. Humanity had won. But Sarah knew that the victory wasn't just about defeating the Galactic Alliance. It was about defeating the idea that humanity was weak, that they could be controlled. They had proven that they could rise above the fear, above the manipulation. They had proven that their unity was stronger than any weapon the Alliance could deploy. As Sarah looked out at the world, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The final battle had been won, but the real war had always been about humanity's place in the universe. The gladiators had fought for their freedom, and now, for the first time, humanity had the power to choose its own future. The stars above, once a symbol of the Alliance's dominance, now seemed within reach. The gladiators had broken free, and the universe would never be the same again. The tension in the air was palpable as Sarah and the gladiators stood on the precipice of their final confrontation. The Galactic Alliance, once an unseen force controlling the fate of planets across the galaxy, had now revealed its true intentions. But what they hadn't anticipated was the relentless will of humanity. The gladiators had proven that their strength lay not just in physical ability, but in their unshakable resolve, their unity, and their ability to defy the odds when the stakes were highest. Now, as the remnants of the divide's influence faded, Sarah felt an eerie silence settle over Earth. The planet had been on the brink of falling apart, but now it was still. The citizens of Earth were beginning to recover from the mental and emotional turmoil they had been subjected to, but the fear that had been planted in their minds remained. The divide between humanity's trust and mistrust, between unity and division, was fragile. But the gladiators had won something far more valuable than their freedom. They had earned the right to define their own destiny. The Galactic Alliance, though powerful, had underestimated humanity's greatest weapon, their capacity to fight not just for survival, but for their future. And now, the Alliance's grip on Earth was slipping. The final battle wasn't just a matter of technology, strategies, or raw power. It was a battle of ideologies, a struggle between control and freedom. The Galactic Alliance's tactics had always relied on domination and subjugation. They believed that the strongest were destined to rule, but humanity had proven that their strength lay in their ability to defy such notions. They had shown that freedom, not control, was the true measure of strength. In the heart of the now quieted cities, Sarah and the gladiators stood together, preparing for the next step. The Galactic Alliance had sent emissaries to Earth, still believing that the final victory could be theirs. But this time, humanity was ready. No more would they be manipulated. No more would they be tested. It was time to face the Alliance on their own terms. The emissaries arrived in an unassuming craft, sleek and silver, hovering silently in the sky. They landed in the heart of a once chaotic city. Now eerily calm, a crowd gathered, not with fear, but with determination. The gladiators stood at the front, Sarah leading the charge. The message was clear. This was humanity's world now, and they would not let it be taken from them. The emissaries stepped out, their alien forms towering over the crowd. They were here to negotiate, to offer a deal, a place in the Galactic Empire where Earth would be spared further destruction in exchange for submission. They had come to see if humanity had learned its place. Sarah stepped forward, her voice strong, yet calm. We have learned. We have learned that we are not your pawns. We are not gladiators in your arena. We are Earth, and we choose our fate." The emissaries looked down at her, their cold, calculating eyes scanning the crowd. They had expected resistance, but not like this. They had never encountered a species that would openly reject their power. But Sarah and the gladiators knew that the battle for Earth's future wasn't about defeating an enemy in battle. It was about rejecting the idea that their future could be written by anyone else but themselves. The leader of the emissaries sneered, "You do not understand. This is the way of the universe. The strongest rule. It is the law. You are too weak to stand against us." Sarah's eyes locked onto the emissaries, and in that moment, something shifted. The crowd around her stood taller, their resolve hardening. "Your law isn't our law," she replied. "Your way isn't the only way. We've shown that we can fight, but we've also shown that we can unite. We choose freedom. We choose our future." The emissary's expression faltered. Just for a moment, he had expected resistance, but not this kind of resistance. It was one thing to fight back with weapons, but another entirely to stand up with nothing but belief and unity. The gladiators weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something more profound, the right to exist. On their own terms, the leader of the emissaries stepped forward, his voice dripping with disdain. "You may think you have won, but you have only delayed the inevitable. The galaxy does not bend to your will. You are nothing." But Sarah was unshaken. "We are not nothing. We are everything. We are the future, and we will not bow to you." With that, the gladiators surged forward, not in violence, but in defiance. They had already defeated the greatest weapon the Alliance had thrown at them, their ability to divide. Now, they were ready to take on the final test, standing tall in the face of the impossible. The emissaries might have been powerful, but they were not human, and that was what made the difference. The Galactic Alliance had no answer to humanity's heart, the drive to protect, to unite, and to never give up. The emissaries hesitated, unsure of how to respond. They had been conditioned to believe that strength came from control, that power came from domination. But the gladiators had shown them that true strength came from the freedom to choose, from the courage to stand together and fight for what was right. In that moment, the fate of Earth hung in the balance. But Sarah knew they had already won. The galaxy might have been vast, but it would never understand humanity the way Earth did. They were not gladiators in an arena. They were a force of nature. The emissaries, realizing they could not break the human spirit, finally retreated. The crowd erupted in a mixture of relief and triumph. Humanity had not only survived the trials, they had transcended them. The world was theirs to shape, free from the control of those who had sought to dominate them. As Sarah stood among the gladiators, looking out at the future they had fought for, she felt the weight of their victory settle over her. Earth was no longer a battleground, no longer an arena. It was home. The arena had been shattered, and humanity was free. The stars above were no longer a reminder of the Alliance's power. They were a testament to humanity's unbreakable spirit. The future was theirs to write, and they would write it on their own terms. The fight had been long, but it was over, and the world was finally theirs.